This will officially start our live stream, and the first thing I would like to do is have you introduce yourself and what you do, and a little bit of what we're going to see today.
Sure. For those of you that haven't heard me in the chat room or anything before or seen any of my other vids with Sophie, I'm Rob Kogan. I'm the curator at the U.S. Army Armor and Cavalry Collection at Fort Benning, Georgia. So I'm a tank curator, as Sophie likes to say, shepherd, a tank shepherd, I mean. And started doing the job about 2 years ago now. Yep, this month. And prior to that, I was an armor officer for 10 years. So I've been on tanks, I've been on Bradley cavalry fighting vehicles, um, pretty much most of the mechanized platforms in the U.S. Army. But now I get to take care of older tanks. You could say the tank retirement home. And I also get really good access, of course, to our wonderful archives that we have in our collection. So we will switch some around because I know you all just talked with Bruce Newsom about armor divisions and a new book. And one of his topics he was going on about was the organization of said divisions. One of the things I have here, and this is actually from my personal archives. We also have copies of this in the collection archives are actually owned by Army, but this one I own. I was able to acquire a while ago. This is what we call a TO&E, or Table of Organization. Well, TO&E means Table Organization Equipment. This Table Organization, and what it is it's pretty much the cheat sheet for how an Army unit is organized. So it tells you not only how many units of what type are in each unit, like an armor division in this case, but also tells you how many tanks they were supposed to have, how many jeeps, how many trailers, all those big pieces of equipment. And then it would actually give reference then to sub-documents, so you could then go to those documents, and that would tell you how many rifles a platoon was supposed to have, how many watches a tank platoon were issued, believe it or not. So this particular one that I have, and I'll actually turn the camera on in a second so we can look down at it, this is the March 1st, 1942 Table of Organization for the Armored Force, which is the precursor to today's Armor Branch. So in 1940, we create the Armored Force. It's first independent armor organization in the U.S. Army, and we had to figure out how to organize it. And I'll tell you, we had a lot of stop and go at it initially. So you would get this document. It's not restricted anymore. Do not worry, because we have plenty of copies of these in our archives. So if you were an Army unit staying up, you would get it, you'd open it up. Now, one thing that's really interesting is there's actually some corrections in this, making some changes later on in the year of 1942. And then we have this really, really, really big index here, explaining kind of like our table of allotment of what we were supposed to have. So if you were to look into this, a lot of it, for the most part, is fairly cut and dry. So this is U.S. Army Armor Division of 1942. Now, later in World War II, we refer to this as a heavy division. What makes it a heavy division? Well, you have your division headquarters, of course. You would have attached observation aviation, and those are in Little Bird aircraft. Essentially, like High Wing is kind of like a Piper Cub, like what we consider Piper Cub, or like a Cessna today, but there was various different types that were used back then. But you have an armored reconnaissance battalion, which today we would call an armored cavalry squadron. And then you have in this case, you have two armored regiments. And those two armored regiments, besides having their headquarters, service company, reconnaissance company, maintenance company, the bread and butter of the division, each regiment has two medium tank battalions. And so what a medium tank battalion is, it's equipped with Sherman tanks for most of the war. And then your light battalion, which kind of serves as reconnaissance security for the tank regiment, as well as conducting exploitation missions, that's armed with, at this time, M3 Stuarts. This is a beefy division. Very, very beefy. And in fact, I believe, if I'm looking at this right, you're looking at an aggregate strength of about 14,000 soldiers assigned to it. And then it breaks down each of those individual organizations. So here we see how many ranks. Guess what? They're allotted one major general, two brigadier generals, 7 colonels, a lot of field grade officers. All right, and then it even goes down all the way to just basic privates, over 4,000 of them. So that breaks it all down. So if you were a division, this is how many people by law, by regulation, you are allowed. Then it goes into rifles and armored cars and all the other equipment that you would have. Try to see what else here. So then it breaks down. It's now, oh boy, this is a big spread here. What's this one? Okay, so this is the headquarters section. So division headquarters has lots of different functions. Let's see, we have the adjutant general. So adjutant general over here, that's your equivalent of your HR section. We call it the S1 in the Army. You have your JAG, which is your judge, advocate general, or your legal section, because you have lots of legal paperwork. IG section, which essentially makes everyone else make sure they're all doing their jobs properly. You have the ordnance section, so they're handling your ammunition and major ordnance supplies. Surgeon section, finance section, big one, because if everyone doesn't get paid, then the morale section over here has more trouble. There actually is a morale section in World War II. You have a chaplain section and a postal section. And that's only half of it. I haven't even gone over. There's air sections, there's operations sections. There is a lot of stuff down at the division level, but that's kind of how combined arms tactics work, is that you push that down to the lowest level strategically and operationally possible so that everyone else, everyone has what they need to get the job done. And I'm trying to find here where the tank company one at, because most of them are pretty, I'm just telling you right now, they're pretty boring. Most people would be pretty boring. Me, I look at this is the kind of stuff that keeps me up at night. At one time, as a joke, tried to use something like this to help me sleep because I couldn't sleep, and I ended up staying up all night making notes. But if you go on to, here we go. So this is your World War II medium tank, well, this is the light tank company at the start of the war. So what it tells us, if you're in a light tank company, you're equipped with M3 Stuarts, all right, you have your company headquarters, it's led by a captain, which is what I was in the Army, and you have 3 tank platoons underneath. So those 3 tank platoons each have 5 light tanks, all right? And so one would be led by the platoon leader, then you would have one that's commanded by the platoon sergeant, and then the other tanks are what we call wingman tanks. So they maneuver on with either the platoon leader or platoon sergeant, and they would fight as 2 separate sections, 2 tanks in one section, 3 tanks in the other. And so that's a tank platoon. So when we talk about tank platoons, that's your basic tank organization, 2 sections, 5 tanks in World War II for the US. And then you'll see up here, the company then has 2 tanks, normally would be used by either the company commander or his XO, but often these were used as backup tanks in case the platoons had vehicles break down or lost in combat. Those would be used as fillers, because a lot of times while the company commander may lead his tanks in combat on another tank, he's handling a lot of the operations and logistics enough that he's really not going to be mounted up as much as us captains would like to. Because believe me, I've been, as an armor captain, you think you're still going to be there on the line in the tank, and that doesn't always happen, and it's sad. Like being on tanks.
And so this is in 1942 again, right? And this is in 1942. What? So can you share with some of the viewers some examples of where a group like this would have been deployed at that time?
So that's actually a great question. So I mentioned that this is what we call a heavy tank division. In 1943, after we start going to North Africa with heavy tank divisions, North Africa, it's the 1st and 2nd Armored Division, we realized it's kind of a heavy organization as far, it's hard to break it down. So if you only need half the division to go into combat, it's not designed that way. You can't task organize it. You can't use it a la carte style, which they started learning that, especially as we're using more maneuver warfare, you kind of need that. You can't, sometimes you want to send 2 infantry battalions of a tank battalion. Sometimes you might want all your tank battalions together. And you can't really do it the way this organization was worked out. So we actually changed the organization in 1943 going to 44, and we developed what we call the medium tank division. And in fact, if I look here, I'm actually going to switch the camera. All right, so this is actually a book that someone put together. This is the 1943 medium division. And thankfully, someone actually took all this, plus all the backup notes that go along with it, and made this book. In fact, now I'll show it on scanner. So if you're ever interested in this kind of stuff, if you need some late night reading like me, this is by U.S. Bellinger. And he's supposed to actually write a book on this era division, but I think he's still working on it. So this tells you everything that a tank division would have in 1943-44 into 45. And it's this is kind of nice because compared to this older stuff, he actually has lots of nice drawings. So you can actually see what so here's a mortar platoon, an armored mortar platoon. And then a assault gun section. So these are your 105 millimeter armed Shermans. And you can actually see all of the equipment that platoon would have been issued on all the tanks. So here you see flashlights, flag sets, whistles, watches, ammunition bags, everything. I mean, it just boggles the mind how much stuff really that they're carrying. It's quite incredible. But unfortunately, he hasn't gotten to this book yet. I'm hoping he does. But what's interesting to note is we actually kept 2 divisions in this style of organization. And that's 2nd Armored Division and then 3rd Armored Division. They actually stayed as 2 heavy divisions. And so that's why in Western Europe, in World War II, going to after the D-Day invasion, they're kind of used as the major breakthrough divisions. If the 2nd and 3rd Armored Division are called in, it's a big operation because they're almost twice as big as the other divisions.
Okay, wow, that's awesome.
Yep, and over here, so this is your medium tank company, but it's pretty much organized the same way, except here, because it's 1942, and this is what I find really cool, is the Sherman tank hasn't reached main production yet, so it's still showing M3 Lees being used as the main tank.
This is such a cool view. I'm sorry, continue. I'm like, this is amazing.
It almost, I think it was our friend Lauren who said it almost looks like a sticker book, like I need to put my M3 Lee stickers in there, collect them all up.
Yeah, it's a great visual. I love charts. I love organizational charts because it really helps sort of sort things for me. So this is incredibly cool to see sort of visualized this way instead of read about. Like if it was describing it with a paragraph, for example, like this is quite cool.
Oh, and what I find fascinating, why I think something like this is so important for people to see is, when we look at the division chart, at the beginning, we see all this, and then right here, that's it. That's your armor. Those are your actual tank units. That's it. The rest of this is armored infantry, armored field artillery battalions, your division trains, which is how you're getting all your supplies, ammunition, and fuel. It just shows how the concept of armor isn't just tank. It's tank and everything else that has to support it. All of it's mechanized, all of it's very mobile, all of it's ready for combat to support that armored push. It's very fascinating. For every trigger puller, there's 10 soldiers making that happen.
That's awesome. What are some of the other things that that this particular book that you are showing us might surprise people to learn about the organization of armored divisions at that time?
Oh, well, like I said, that would be the biggest thing is how little of the armored division is the combat trigger pullers. Tanks are great, tanks are cool, but they get nowhere with gas. If you have a tank with no gas, you have a pillbox. And if you have a tank with no gas and no ammunition because you don't have division supply trains, well, now you're just a paperweight in the middle of the road. I think that's the biggest takeaway, and that's what I always find fascinating when I look through this stuff, is just how much support and logistics it takes to make all this happen. And that's something that we struggle with today even. Everyone always says, tacticians, that's amateur stuff. But a real expert in warfare, or true master, is someone who studies logistics.
What are some things that you see, if there are any at all, I'm curious, looking at this from March of 1942, that actually have come forward to your experience with armored vehicles in the campaigns that you took part in?
Well, what's really interesting is tank platoons throughout American history have always been 5 tanks. It wasn't until the M1 Abrams came about we went down to 4 tanks. Some of that argument was made that it's because the Abrams was more capable, that you only needed 4 tanks, but there was actually a lot of proof that shows it's because the Abrams was so expensive, we decided to kind of trim the platoons a little bit. There's some trade-offs to it. The nice thing with the 4 tank platoon is that when you do split it up, it's even, 2 and 2 instead of 2 and 3. But I mean, I would never complain about having an extra tank. But what's really interesting is how we're always, much like how the armored force was trying to bring all these different military occupations, specialties, or jobs, as you will, infantry and armor together into one force. Because technology has increased, our ability to communicate and move supplies and plan, we've gotten smaller. So we went from a division. So one of the cool things about when we went to the medium divisions is that because instead of having armor regiments, you only have tank battalions. This is where they develop that ad hoc task organizing. So they create combat command headquarters. So 3rd Armored Division might have Combat Command A, Combat Command B. They're led by colonels. And one day, Combat Command A might get one of the tank battalions and one of the armored infantry battalions. And then the next day, one of those battalions may go to Combat Command B. It just depends on what the situation is. Today, we call that modular. That's kind of the buzzword with it. And we've actually tried doing that now with what we call our modular brigade combat team concept. We organize now our brigades to be a little bit more piecemeal. So instead of having these big organized divisions now, our brigades kind of have all the assets they need that if we need to, we can plug and play different units now for deployments.
Hey guys, thank you for watching my recorded live stream with Mr. Kogan from the National Armor and Cavalry Collection. It was my absolute pleasure to be able to feature him and show you guys some of the information that he had to share. So if you dug that and you want to see some more, drop the National Armor and Cavalry Collection a follow on their social media as well as their official YouTube channel. They're going to be making some more videos and those are going to be out soon. You don't want to miss out on that. It's going to be great. Rob has an awesome style of presenting information and I love to share it. So thank you guys for watching. If you liked what you saw, drop a subscribe onto this channel, and I'll see you next time.